Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're excited to get ready to rock and roll. Today we're going to be discussing Sell Like a Doctor, 6 sales prescriptions to convert sick prospects into healthy customers. Now, before we introduce our speakers today, did want to make sure everybody gets in, gets comfortable. Wanted to play just a short video around great story, Pure Storage. I'll see you in just a second.
My name is Tyson Gerhold. I'm with Pure Storage, and I'm the Global Director of Sales Operations. We use the HD Forecast and Inside Sales core platforms, and we've been using them for about 4 years now. The predictive analytics aspect of HD Forecast is something that's become a daily tool that our sales management relies upon to understand where their forecast is shaping up, and to also spot productivity issues in the field. Since we've implemented HD Forecast, we've seen our forecast accuracy increase in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% based on geos. And this is driven primarily by the fact that our sales managers now have point-in-time comparisons to last week, last quarter, and last year for each of their sales reps, and then further up the chain to each of their sales districts to understand how people are trending on pipeline growth, bookings to plan, and overall performance on net new logos. Before we implemented HD Forecast, an analyst on my team spent 8 hours a day, 52 weeks a year, generating reports for the entire company. We've now gotten 52 days worth of productivity back from that analyst because a fundamental piece of our planning and analytics is now fully automated. Inside Sales and HD Forecast makes my sales managers smarter, helps them to see around corners, and helps us as a business to be more effective in everything that we do.
Okay, let's get into it. So, quick plug for our podcast, great podcast, Sales Acceleration Show, myself, Steve there, real problems, real people, all things sales. Check it out, iTunes, Google, Stitcher, etc. Couple quick housekeeping items. It's going to be about a 45-minute webinar. Join the conversation, hashtag Inside Sales Webinar, and know that we'll send you the recording a little bit later. Now, great speaker today. Actually, Jared, we did a podcast together. I know these guys. Great things they're doing over at PandaDoc. I'm Gabe Larsen. I run what we call Inside Sales Labs. That's research best practices here at InsideSales.com. Now, Jared, maybe I can just turn it over to you and you can introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, sure thing. So entrepreneur by trade, started my own marketing agency at the ripe age of about 20 years old, then founded a company called JobHive, and today I head the inside sales and channel reseller efforts here at PandaDoc, and we're kicking butt and implemented some cool things around what we call the 6 gateways of sales, and are excited to share that today.
Yeah, let's jump in. And I know I speak for Jared on this. Everybody, please, jump on the Q&A. If you see it, dish down below or to your right there. Ask questions as we go along. Let's make this interactive. And please do connect with us on LinkedIn. Jared and I will be offended if you don't continue the conversation. So with that, Jared, over to you.
All righty. So today we're going to be covering these 6 sales prescriptions on how to build a more transparent and easy to utilize sales process. So the first one's vision and alignment. We're going to talk about that. Validation and trust. We'll go into some discovery with pain and value. Decisionmaker, price, and time. So let's get rocking and rolling on why you're not a doctor yet. So I'm going to ask you guys a question today. What do you feel like is the purpose of a salesperson? I actually think it's to bitch and moan. Most salespeople complain that the leads are weak, that they're having some problems getting to their number, etc. Salespeople are inherently kind of negative because you're only as good as your last deal, right? And there's a big problem with sales today. That problem is that it's a learned trade and there's just way too many of us. For instance, well, there's about 15 million of us in the United States alone. A lot of salespeople, and what ends up happening is we're kind of all lost in translation without certification. For better or for worse, there's really no quality control on people or process. People are typically hired based on past experiences, and there's not a lot that we have in terms of, degrees. For instance, you're never going to see something like this, which is a Harvard University degree in business development and, a specialty in crushing quota. Doesn't happen. But there are some prescriptions that we can follow. So one of these things, or how I wanted to frame this conversation, is what these 6 prescriptions are is they're not deceptive. We're not trying to trick customers into buying. They're not necessarily sales tactics, and they certainly don't do the hard work for you. Really, what we have going on today is these are very simple stages of sales that you need to move a prospect through. And what we're going to refer to throughout the rest of this conversation and how you can work this with your reps, your managers, or your sales organization is we're going to refer to these 6 prescriptions or 6 gateways to ask each other, where is my customer stuck, or where is my prospect stuck? Is it in the first prescription, the 3rd prescription, or the 6th? So we can start to have a real conversation about where people are actually at in their buyer's journey. So with that, let's jump in. So again, the 6 stages in their proper order, where these deals are actually stuck. And actually, I think the most important one is the 6 reasons your customers won't actually buy. So when we say where a deal is stuck, that's what we're trying to identify, is where in these prescriptions is that deal currently at, instead of just in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 in your CRM. So let's start with vision and alignment. This is something that's actually not talked about nearly enough, yet your doctor does a really good job of painting this picture for you, sharing a vision of what's to come and getting some alignment around that. So the prescription first 1 goals. This is going to be about establishing the vision of your company. And it's also a little bit about creating alignment or even creating intentional misalignment with the rest of your industry or other competitors in your space. What do you believe in as a company, as a sales organization, on how you help your customers? It's also about eliminating prospects from your pipeline as quickly as possible. In other words, you can kind of think of this first prescription as features versus values, or as Simon Sinek said, it's more about the why versus the what and the how. Why should someone be interested in having a conversation with you or discussing your product or service versus how it's going to help them? That's what we're talking about with the first gateway. And I'm going to give you a really great example that we can probably relate to if we're in the technology space. So let's take a look at HipChat. So this is Atlassian, a very successful company. They just bought Trello for $425 million. But they got their butts handed to them with HipChat. Well, why? Because HipChat was all about selling features. Whenever you had a conversation with an Atlassian sales rep, or you just engage with the Atlassian marketing materials, since they're primarily inbound driven, you're just thinking, I already have Skype, but I use GChat. I use Chatter. I don't need another chat tool. So what HipChat sold was an innovative new group chat for teams. It wasn't really that compelling. There wasn't a why. But then guess who else came along? Well, Slack. And what Slack sold was a vision. And what they did was very different. They sold a vision that easy collaboration is valuable, that information should be free. And they actually even put that email for internal purposes is completely evil. It's like the worst possible thing you could do for productivity inside of your organization. They made an enemy out of email for internal collaboration. They shared a very good vision that actually moved the needle for them before they ever engaged in any sales conversations. People who were signing up for Slack and taking these conversations had alignment around this vision. For instance, at PandaDoc, if someone's very happy with the way that they're currently closing deals, signing contracts, and collecting cash, and they don't believe that there's a better way than Microsoft Word and a PDF, we're probably not going to have a deal. We're going to be stuck indefinitely in the first gateway or the first prescription. And part of this boils down to really defining your enemy. It's a little bit of some old school tactics, the art of war, Sun Tzu. This is where you divide and conquer. You create that intentional misalignment with, if you're currently happy with the way that these things are done and you don't believe they're a better way, we're not the right solution for you. In whatever industry you're selling it, whether you're selling a product or a service, you have to paint the picture of a better way and say that you're different. It's an old school tactic, but it still works today, especially in sales. And what you need to do is you need to share a vision or part ways as quickly as you can. This is what we believe in as an organization. And if you're not if this doesn't appeal to you, if you don't believe that there's a better way or a different way that's going to help increase your productivity or lead generation or contracting process, whatever that is, then we're probably not the right fit, right? It's also a little bit about the principle of least attraction, that you're not supposed to be for everyone. And this is such a common mistake, is that people believe in terms of sales that they can do a little bit of everything. Salespeople, to our detriment, a lot of times we're just yes men. Can you guys do this? Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, what about this? Oh, yes. It's actually really powerful to say no and to define your enemy and say, this is not who we are, but this definitely is. So why is prescription 1 so crucial? Well, whenever you paint the status quo as unacceptable, you kind of establish yourself as a little bit of an industry leader. Think about it in terms of your doctor. If there's a new innovative treatment that is eliminating a lot of the pain points and side effects of a certain prescription, and you say, this is the way it used to be done in the medical field, but today it's done this way for these reasons, and I don't believe in this old way, you're going to believe in that doctor's vision of this better way a lot more. You can do the same thing in sales. I also like to say that if you can't create a vision alone that's worth selling, the problem probably isn't with your prospect. It's actually probably with your product or your service. So take a deep, hard look in some of your go-to-market strategies and really solidify with your team and your organization around that vision. Because I believe if you don't value Gateway 1 or Prescription 1, you actually don't value your time. You're going to be selling to a lot of people that you just can't get out of that first prescription. So if you progress through your deal cycle without successfully traversing Gateway 1, at worst they won't buy, but at best they won't stay. You're not going to have these customers for life that we're all so excited about with this revolution in customer success. So if you're still undiagnosed in Prescription 1 phase, here's a few questions for you guys to write down or take away from this presentation. Did you start with why in your sales conversations? Did you explain where your vision comes from to create alignment with your customer around that shared vision? Is there a mutual level of excitement around this better way? Do you guys share common enemies? Ask these questions and document them in your sales process. So when you're doing one-on-ones with your reps, or if you're a rep yourself, you can ask yourself those questions. Am I stuck in the first prescription? Yes or no? I think it'll help you answer that question. Now let's jump into the second phase, which is validation and trust, which is the most appropriate to discussing how we sell like doctors. And I actually think it's probably one of the most evaluated portions of a sales process. Because I think the biggest problem in sales comes down to trustworthiness. What do you guys think is the percentage of people that trust salespeople? Well, it's about 3%. Pretty terrible. I mean, that's up there. I think that's worse than politicians. I think it's worse than lawyers. That's pretty bad. And you know what's funny is that, that 15 million number of salespeople in the United States I shared earlier? Yeah, that's about 3% of the population. So it sounds like only salespeople trust salespeople, which is another interesting fact. In short, we really suck at gaining trust. If we're down there with the politicians and the lawyers, we have some serious work to do in order to gain the trust of our prospects and create healthy customers for life. So what can we do to gain trust? Well, this is where validation comes into play. Your company, first and foremost, should be able to leverage at the top of the marketing funnel case studies, testimonials. In fact, your growth. A lot of buyers today are skeptical that your solution is going to be around long enough, or your service, for you to offer a long-term ROI. What kind of PR have you gotten? What kind of white papers or ebooks or educational content can you invest in to say that you command some sort of authority in the space at which you're currently servicing? And actually, most importantly, I think marketers need to make salespeople more famous. So not just case studies of how your company helped people, but how did you help that client? For instance, I have a great case study of how I helped a partner by recording a bunch of videos and documenting a process to move the deal across the finish line and help them reinvent their process. I don't just reference how this company is now utilizing our software to close more business. I utilize this case study to say, here's how Jared helped me implement a more effective process, and the software provided more value to my organization. You should actually have content that centers around you on why you're a trustworthy person to work with and how you're personally invested in helping people achieve the ROI that they expect to see from a product or software purchase. And a little bit of a tip too, if you can command some area of expertise around your space, and this could be as simple as a LinkedIn post. Everyone has an open format with LinkedIn. You can write some content, even if it's not about sales leadership or management or marketing leadership, customer success leadership. It could literally be around your product or service industry. Here's a little tip. Write something on LinkedIn on how you help these people, what you believe in, and continue to adapt that skill over time. Include a link to your latest post in your email signature line. About 11% of my emails are clicked through my email signature, and I have my top reps and managers doing the same thing. When people are consuming content about helping them in this space or helping them with their sales organization or whatever area you focus, you build some inherent level of trust because you validated, again, this is a validation and trust prescription, that you're someone who can be trustworthy in this space. In short, you need to be the doctor, not the rep. This is about creating a shift in mindset from selling to solving, from closing to validating. There's a couple ways we can do this. The 4 ways that doctors gain trust, they're going to start from an area of passion. When you walk into a doctor's office, you really feel that the doctor cares about what they're invested in helping you solving. They're asking these questions, they're diving into discovery, which we'll talk about next, but they're really passionate about helping people, right? They took that Hippocratic oath and they went to college. They invested a lot of time in helping people like you. And you know that because they're a doctor. As a sales rep, you're at a disadvantage. You need to come from a position of passion. Doctors also utilize great facts. This is where your white papers and your ebooks and your case studies come into play on how you help organizations like the one you're selling to. Doctors are going to bring out previous stories and peer-reviewed papers, et cetera, on how this prescription, this surgery, this medicine, this whatever, and the chances of it actually affecting the outcome and producing a better result than you otherwise would have experienced without going to the doctor. They're great at diving into deeper pains. You came in here today because you have a chest pain and you have some numbness in your right arm. I'm starting to think that this might be something related to your arteries, but I want to ask you some more questions to see if this might not be, neurological, or it might be tied to another symptom. They're really great at diving deep to understand and help you solve the problem, not from the outcome first, but by validating that the problem itself is currently being experienced by the organization. And lastly, they have a pretty good air of authority. Doctors do a great job that when you walk in, you feel like this person is more well-educated than I am a lot of times. They understand what I'm going through as good as me or even better than me because they've seen this hundreds, if not thousands of times. As a sales rep or as a manager, anyone who's leading a prospect through a buyer's journey, you should command some authority because you've helped companies go through this process multiple times. And this is something you have to communicate back to them. When you hear a relevant pain point, you should bring up on how you helped that other company or how your company helped that other company traverse very similar tumultuous waters. Utilize these ways to gain trust throughout your process and continue to reinforce them. But why is this so crucial? I think prescription 2 is so crucial because I refer to it as a blind trap. The amount of people that don't buy because they don't trust a sales rep is alarmingly high, but it most often goes misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. If you ask a prospect straight up if they trust you, I'd be willing to bet that not a single person on the webinar today has asked a prospect or had a rep ask, do you trust me? It's a weird question to ask, and I'm not saying you should, but it's going to go undiagnosed. So it's something that you have to continually reinforce over a sales cycle and feel confident that you're not stuck in prescription 2. And I think it's one of those things that the more you start to practice in bringing out the rationale and the ways that a doctor utilizes validation to gain trust, the better you become at it. It's something you need to continue to work in your sales process. And diagnose. I believe that we've only had 1 call with the CIO. My champion I've had 4 calls with. My champion trusts me, but the CIO is the decision maker. I need to earn her trust. These are the things that we should be talking about in our one-on-ones, in our sales review calls, in our opportunity or pipeline reviews. We need to focus on trust and gaining trust of the people who will be making that purchasing decision, not just our champions. So I think we too often get caught up there. It's akin almost to coming in with a a husband and a wife and a child, or a parent and a child relationship, where the person who might be your champion to push someone across the line may not actually be the person making the decision. Doctors do a great job at ensuring that if it's a family decision about an operation, a prescription, etc., that the family's bought in, that you've gained trust with multiple stakeholders. So are you still undiagnosed? Here's some questions. Have you shared content that helps highlight your personal ability, not just your company's, to help your clients? Are your clients' wins referenceable? Can you actually hand a current prospect to an existing customer to say, hey, Joe, I'd like you to meet Susan from Acme Co. We helped her go through a similar situation that you guys are going through. Feel free to reach out and see how that impacted their organization. And lastly, do you believe yourself? Do a little bit of introspection and ask, if I was in their shoes and I was skeptical of salespeople like 97% of people are, would I trust me at this point in this conversation or in this sales journey? Great question to ask. Let's jump into Gateway 3 now, where we go a little bit deeper into discovery and talk about some pain points and unearthing those pain points. More importantly, unearthing pain points of not solving and tying that to corresponding value. So I think there's a lot of mistakes that you can make in using Prescription 3. I think a lot of people today, they do what I call feature pitching, or in short, they show up and throw up, right? You get a warm prospect that has some interest in your solution out of the gate, and the first thing you try to do is sell them or pitch to them all the ways that you can help them, right? Or all the things that your product or service does. That's the easiest mistake. We need to step back away from this and reframe the conversation in this pain and value prescription state. So how do we do that? Well, what we need to do is discover, understand, and communicate 3 types of pain. This is pain that's currently being experienced by the customer. So this involves asking questions about what's wrong with their process, what are their goals, what are these things that are standing in the way of them hitting their goals. And these could be current goals, future goals, growth objectives, etc. What are those pain points surrounding that process and getting from A to B? The second thing is, what happens if you don't hit those goals? What happens if you miss those targets? What happens if these pain points go unsolved for a quarter, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years? What happens then, right? And asking and diving deeper into, well, if this is something that you don't solve in the next year, what would that look like for your organization? It's going to help you understand whether or not A, you have a deal, but B, help them internalize the pain of not adopting a solution. This would help motivate some buyers to create some action. And lastly, you should also discover, understand, and communicate the pain that your solution does not solve. It's just as important to identify when you're going through this discovery process and point out, okay, you talked about these 3 types of pains, A and B, this is what we're here for to solve. C, though, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. It's not something that's a core area of focus for our business, and I don't believe our solution is going to help you achieve that objective. You need to be very transparent about these 3 types of pain throughout your discovery process in Prescription 3 of pain and value. Because one of the things that you need to do is not only become the doctor, but you really need to become the consultant. And that's really what a doctor is. The doctor's discovering your pain and consulting you on potential outcomes and solutions to get from A to B. Because one of my favorite sayings is that suggestions are easy, but they're also worthless. I could suggest to you guys all day long on how to optimize your sales process and increase rep productivity and reduce lead response time, all of these things. But the more important thing is actually making recommendations. Recommendations are hard, but they're invaluable. And that's why I have this logo up here with this company called Avanade. I bet not many people are familiar with Avanade. They're a jointly owned company by Accenture and Microsoft. And they charge big bucks. We're talking multi-million-dollar contracts for coming into organizations, doing deep discovery into pain points, long-term growth objectives, and solving those solutions by making hard recommendations and actually changing the business. This is an organization that's actually a change agent for the enterprise, for the Fortune 500 companies. And because they do such a good job at pain and value of becoming a consultant, their recommendations are hard, but they're invaluable. That's what we need to do a better job at, is when we see something wrong with our organization or our client that we're working with, a prospect, we need to be able to come on strong and say, because of these pain points that you're experiencing, we're going to make some tough recommendations to help you solve those in a timely fashion. And that needs to come from an experience of being someone like a consultant, like a doctor, a trustworthy figure. Another side point here is that what's the most powerful word in sales? When you're going through this pain and value process in this prescription stage and you're unearthing some of these things, sometimes you're going to find, like I mentioned, some things that you can't really solve for. And more often than not, it's much better just to say, no, we can't solve that, or no, we can't do that, or no, I'm not going to recommend that you move down that path. This ties back to, again, us being too easily susceptible to becoming yes men or yes women, where we want to say that, yes, we can solve that pain, or yes, that's a great idea if the client's making some absurd suggestion on how they might utilize your tool, software, or service. We need to be much more clear whenever we have a firm no, and then it goes against our recommendation. Whenever you ask a doctor flat out if there's something you should do, the doctor's going to tell you no. For instance, you might have a knee injury. Hey, doctor, my knee's feeling a little bit better. I know I'm only in week 2 of recovery, but I want to go for a run next week. What's the doctor going to say? He's going to say, no, you cannot. And guess what? Most of the time, you're going to listen. That's the goal of discovering that pain and value, so you can make these hard statements like, no, you should not do that. My recommendation is not to. I think what you don't solve is just as important as what you do. And being that consultant, being that doctor is a key part of being able to help them beyond your niche or narrow-pointed solution or software service. It's actually being able to make recommendations as it's tied to ancillary things around that sales process. So if you're still undiagnosed at this point in prescription 3, pain and value, just a couple questions to ask. Does my customer understand the pain from not solving their issue? Again, what does these goals look like over the next quarter, 6 months, year, 2 years, if they don't solve this problem? Secondly, does my customer believe the value of the solution will help them exceed or reach their goals? Right? Can you ask? Can you actually say, hey, based on your growth objectives, it looks like you're off target based on what we've discussed. If we implement X, Y, and Z as we have discussed, do you feel confident that you would exceed your growth goals? You need to be able to ask these questions to see if you successfully traverse prescription 3 or stage 3 in this sales process. Moving on. So we're at gateway 4 or prescription 4 right now, which is Decisionmaker. Now, we've all dealt with selling to champions and then DMs, et cetera, but this is definitely a prescription stage here. Deals get stuck here and they're misdiagnosed as being stuck elsewhere all the time. So let's talk a little bit about decision makers versus champions. I think internal champions are great. Oftentimes that's going to need to be who you talk to in order to walk away with a next step, a conversation, or have an internal advocate when you're away. But let's make something perfectly clear. If you are a good salesperson or you manage a great sales team, you only sell to decision makers. You might think you're selling to a champion, but you're not. Let's be clear, we only sell to decision makers. Why? Well, because champions lie a lot. They'll tell you one thing in the face to make you feel good about your deal, but in reality, behind the scenes, they just got taken, to the dugout by their boss. And they're not going to inform you about that conversation the way that you need to be informed. It's just in human nature for us to be too positive about the situation moving forward. They're going to paint rainbows and unicorns for you when you might have some real objections. A champion, though, can help you gather this information and bring those right people to the call. But at the end of the day, they're really no more than a gatekeeper, and more often than not, they're going to stand in your way as opposed to helping you achieve your next step. So we need to make a transition here from utilizing champions as someone that's where we're deal dependent on them, and a champion for us is actually someone who helps bring the decision maker into multiple calls, looping in them into the proof of concepts or the trial period or whatever timeline you have, where you have some sort of respect contract at the beginning of how this process is going to work. And at the end of the call, you have a mutual action plan that is not just agreed to by your champion, but is also agreed to by your decision maker. Again, it could be a parent and a child in a doctor's office. The doctor is going to make sure that, they got the buy-in of both people because they know at the end of the day, the parent's going to make the decision for the child. Even though their patient, they might feel is the child, they know the decision maker is the parent. Another way to decide who's actually a champion versus who's a decision maker, there's some questions that we can ask here and dive a little bit deeper. And you can ask some really cool questions here that's different than who has purchasing authority, because that sounds really offensive. You can ask some questions like, how are your goals set in your organization? If you find out who's setting goals, you typically find out who has the most authority. Champions try to hit goals, decision makers create them. It's a big difference here. Another thing you can ask is one of my more favorite ways to find out if you're stuck in the decision maker prescription phase is utilizing a quick question at the beginning of a conversation. In order for this solution, product, or service to work, who would need to be looped in to make sure that this is a success, right? So then you might have some external stakeholders or users, but you'll also find that you're going to find out who that person is that is actually the decision maker. Looped in is a harmless phrase that should get you the information that you need. And then you can also follow up with, okay, it sounds like Joe, Billy, and Susan need to be involved. Can you tell me a little bit more about their roles in the company? And then they'll tell them, okay, Joe's the CIO, Billy's the VP of Customer Success, and then Susan's our CRO. Okay, great. And in order to move forward with anything with this solution, it sounds like Joe would be the one that needs to have the sign off in addition to your buy-in. Yes, that's right. Great. Now you've identified properly, and at the end of the call, you can make that firm request that in order to move forward, Joe needs to be involved moving forward. The goal of Prescription 4 is to understand, again, as early as possible, is who is or are the decision makers. Because here's the pernicious part, and this is why I put it, this is gateway 4, Prescription 4, is that champions don't walk decision makers through the first 3 gateways. So we talked at the beginning, right, about setting a vision and creating alignment. Champions don't do that for you. We talked about using validation to gain trust. The director of sales is not going to get the trust of the CIO as easily as you might think. We also talk about unearthing pain of not adopting or solving those problems. If you had that conversation with a champion, guess what? You're going to have to do it again with the decision maker. So the objective is to keep as many of those people involved in your sales cycle and process as long as you can. Lastly, you're still undiagnosed. Here's some questions that you can ask to see if you're stuck in Prescription 4 or Gateway 4. Does this person set the goals? If they do, you're probably talking to a good person. 2, are they directly responsible for the success of a purchase? So whose butt is on the line for solving this problem? Whose responsibility actually is it? And lastly, do they need to loop in other colleagues? And who are those people? So we've gone through the first 4 prescriptions now. We're going to start to wrap things up with the last 2, which are actually kind of fun because this is where I bet most people think their deals are actually stuck, and I would say wrong. Let's move on to Prescription 5, price. So I've asked this across dozens of conferences, and I gave a similar talk at Inbound this year. And I asked the audience, is price an objection in at least 50% of your deals? I couldn't count any hands that weren't raised in an audience of a few hundred. Most people say, yeah, price is an objection in at least half of my deals. For that, I would say, you are wrong. It is not an objection in 50% of your deals. In fact, I would say that price is a false ailment. Price, to me, is actually never a legitimate objection. What it is a false gateway that makes you try to negotiate around price because the prospect is actually trying to hedge their bet because of one of the 4 following reasons. A, they're a champion. They're not a decision maker. So they're trying to get the best possible deal to take to their decision maker. B, they don't believe that you will provide enough value to solve their pain points, or they don't believe that it's so painful to solve that problem, the corresponding value is not going to be there. C, it could be, Gateway 2, Prescription 2, where they frankly don't trust you yet, so they're hedging their bet. This may or may not work, so I'm willing to take this risk at a lower price. Or at the beginning, they could just be flat out stuck where they don't have alignment around your vision. You might have a decent tool or a decent service, but it's not that much that they're not so much excited about it. They just think it might make a small impact to their bottom line. Price is always a false ailment and an illegitimate objection in my book. Because I think actually BANT is bull. It's a dead concept. If you guys are prioritizing budget, authority, need, and time, what it does is it's a legacy process that overemphasizes budget over the first 4 prior prescriptions. And what it does is it sets you up to feel like most of your deal hinges on price, when it's actually stuck in a previous prescription state. It's a very pernicious gateway because it sends all sorts of false signals. It uses budget actually to justify price against the customer. You actually create some misalignment with your prospect. And centering a purchase around available budget is not the way that we sell today. It's around these previous gateways, these previous prescriptions. And that's why price is such a pernicious gateway. I think that price is actually the most commonly misdiagnosed objection in a deal cycle. Think about it. In one of the 4 previous ways, in Gateway 1, they don't believe in your better way. They don't trust your company, solution, or you. Again, we need to focus on trust, on elevating the trustworthiness of our reps themselves. In Gateway 3, the prospect cannot accurately correspond the value to pain or understand the cost of not adopting, or you're not talking to the Decisionmaker. But no matter the case, if you think you're stuck in the 5th prescription, you're either going to lose the deal now or you're going to lose it later because it's misdiagnosed. The only good news here is that price is an indicator. So if you think you're stuck here, you actually need to go back to diagnose in what previous of the 4 prescriptions are they actually stuck. So let's ask the question, because I'm sure some people are thinking it. Can price ever be an objection unto itself? Can it? What percentage do you actually believe it to be? 0. It's none. If you successfully traverse the previous gateway, previous 4 gateways, and I promise you, every time, price is never a legitimate objection. Now, you might be thinking, well, they really don't have the budget available. Well, let's think about it. If they don't have the budget available, but they're going to miss their sales targets, and your solution has the ability to help them hit them, what price is not worth it? You're actually going to be stuck in Gateway 3 in that instance. You're not actually stuck in Gateway 5. It's the wrong conversation to have to try and discount or argue on price. What you need to have is a further conversation around 3, pain and value. That's where that objection is actually stuck. You're never going to be stuck here, and you need to work on this with your reps in your sales organization. Because if you think you're still misdiagnosed here, no, you're wrong. You're never stuck in the 5th prescription. Never. All right. We got one more prescription to go through today before we jump into some Q&A, and that is time. Time, the 6th gateway. This is when we're going to close the deal. This is when we're at the finish line. So what kind of prescription gateway is 6? Well, just like Gateway 5 for prescription 5, it is another illegitimate objection. Time, like price, is not where your deal is stuck. So when is the right time for prescription 6? When do you get to prescription 6? Well, if you've successfully traversed the previous 5 gateways, the only time to enter the 6th gateway is right now. So what I mean by that is if you can confirm you've walked through each prescription, you're going to ask for the deal now. You're going to ask for them to sign now. And what does that mean? You need to ask yourself this question. If I ask my prospect to sign right now, will they? If the answer is yes, then you need to ask them to sign now. If you can't confidently close it this minute, you are stuck in a previous gateway. Here's why this is so wrong. Because you will see in a sales manager's, close loss report, you're going to see timing as an objection all the time. And you'll see deals that get pushed out quarter over quarter, month over month, where the rep and the customer are both centered around the objection of time. It's not the right time. And I'm calling BS here. It is actually not stuck in time. It's stuck in one of the previous 5 gateways. That's where you're actually stuck. For instance, do you ever go to a doctor and out of nowhere, you're having this problem, the doctors help you understand the consequences of not, operating on that, and you go, it's just not the right time. No, you don't. The objection's never going to be centered around time. If the doctor's making a recommendation on a surgery that might impact your life, and you go, well, my odds are actually not that bad that something seriously life-threatening would happen to me, so I don't believe that I need to do the surgery today or this week or this month. Let's continue to do some follow-ups, right, into the future to see if my condition progresses. The doctor might say, okay, it's fine, it's not the right time. In reality, the odds, the pain is not felt that bad by the customer, by the patient. They're not stuck in gateway 6 with time. They actually don't believe there's enough value to be had from the surgery, and there's no reason to do it now. So it's a false indicator, and it's a pernicious one because it's going to have you push out your deals when that's not actually what you need to do. So how to know when to close? It's pretty straightforward. Recap your progress through the previous gateways. Ask them to sign, purchase, etc. on the phone with some mechanism of conversion, an e-sign, e-commerce, you name it. If you get a no when you ask someone to buy now, then it's time to walk it out again. Walk the opportunity through the prescriptions again and again. Listen for those indicators of hesitation, such as, well, I'm not sure, I don't know, I need to talk with, and dive deeper to unearth and understand, oh, I'm actually stuck in stage 2 right now. They don't really trust my company. They feel that we're too early stage, and I need to work on with this customer explicitly on helping them gain more trust that my company's helped other companies like theirs. What I call this walk to the close method. You're trying to unearth where the prospect's actually stuck before they buy. And I kid you not, I've walked with reps deals through the close as much as 7 times on a call to unearth where they were actually stuck, only to find out that there was actually another person that needed to be looped in, that our so-called champion was hiding from the rest of the equation. Whereas we would have thought timing was the objection, it's actually Decisionmaker, because we had to walk through and ask questions around vision, around trust, around pain and value, in ensuring that we had the right process moving forward to make a decision. Continue to walk those deals to the close. Why is it so crucial for prescription 6? It's really because 5 and 6 are the most common reasons deals die. If I look at any of your closed loss reports, we're going to see price and timing is over 50% of those objections. It's the same with every sales organization. And they send false indicators to the rest of your sales team. They send false indicators to your product team, to your marketing team, that these are the reasons that deals are dying, when in fact they're stuck in a previous prescription state. I think there are also excuses. You know, humans, they don't like to get to the bottom of why there's a no. And it's so easy for us to say, oh, it's just too expensive, or it wasn't the right time. We do it ourselves. You know, if we're shopping for a car, if we're shopping for anything, you know, it's too expensive, it's not the right time. What ends up happening is you haven't made it through those prior gateways or prescription states to actually make a decision to buy now, where the price is justified and I can buy today. Because at any given time, all of your deals, every closed won deal has made it through this, the 6 prescriptions. And every closed loss deal is stuck in one of the first 4, every time. If you believe you're actually stuck in Gateway 6, you're wrong. I think your deal is actually dead, or at least it's postponed for the foreseeable future. And I think you're actually literally betting on luck. You know, there's some chance the deal might close, so I'm going to push it out another month and I'll continue to follow up, and they might just sign. That's where most people are actually at. Think about it. Your lost deals, they were a complete waste of time. You did not make any progress. You didn't move the needle. You just spent too much time with a misdiagnosed closed loss reason. You misdiagnosed and your patient's dead. That's the difference between a doctor and us, is that we can afford to lose the patient, so we're sloppy with how we diagnose. And we need to create a fundamental change in how we think about that and stop using price and time as this, you know, false crutch for us to lean on why we push out a deal or why we have a closed loss report that just does not seem to reflect reality. We can't let our patients die anymore because those are our clients. If we actually care about helping them, we're going to diagnose where they're actually stuck. So, in short, treat your deals like your patients. Don't kill them. Don't misdiagnose. Understand what prescription state they're in and create some alignment around these 6 prescription states in your sales team and ask these questions. Where's my deal stuck? What gateway, what prescription state are we actually in? And walk your team members through this. Do this as a collaborative exercise. You're going to create a lot of value around this in your sales organization, and it's going to help you tremendously in your process. So the quick recap, we have the 6 prescriptions of sales. They're simple. You don't need to make this harder than it needs to be. Sales is really simple. There's way too many conflicting, you know, books, ideas, etc. If you align around the 6 prescriptions of sales, they're going to apply to every single deal without exception. With the 6 prescriptions of sales, you'll convert your prospects into healthy customers. So thank you guys so much for jumping into the webinar today and joining us for the 6 prescriptions of sales. Gabe, let's jump it on to the next phase and see if we have any Q&A.
Yeah, let's do it. We've got a little bit of time, Jared. Fascinating. A lot of content, you guys. I love the prescription. You are looking right here at kind of one of the takeaways might be advantageous. It's a sales enablement ebook. We've got a couple others that we did want to throw out to you. You can grab those in the resource. That ebook from Jared and PandaDoc is going to be fantastic. We got a sales process cheat sheet that you can kind of noodle on. But let's just see if we can go into briefly a couple Q&A, Jared, and then we'll wrap this up. So one question that came in, you mentioned the Simon Sinek and you hit the why, and the question, I thought it was fun, was, you know, how do you, it's easier said than done. Any coaching on how do you actually do it? How do you come up with your why if you're stuck in your what and your how? Oh, Jared, did I lose you, or was it just a bad question?
Oh, we got accidentally muted somehow. Okay, so you need to go up the funnel. You need to go up the funnel and go from your features, which are at the bottom. Here's my features, and maybe even below the funnel, here's the value that those provide, and go, why does that matter? I think the example with HipChat and Atlassian. Slack is actually very, very appropriate to any organization. Why does it matter? And if you're stuck with trying to internalize your own, think about it from the perspective of your enemy and create your why from that. Well, we don't believe the same thing as this service company. Well, what do they believe? How do they go about running their business so that you're so fundamentally different? Or we don't believe in building a product this way. Well, why don't you believe that? Well, it's inefficient. It takes too much time. It does all of these different things. Okay, so you guys believe that there's a better way for this. And it could be as simple as, we believe there's a better way to create and send documents. Great. We created an enemy out of Adobe PDF, right? That's our enemy. If you're utilizing that and you're happy with it, you don't think there can be a better way, we're not the right fit for you. It can be very simple. You don't need to over-engineer it. I would say start with your enemies, what you don't believe in, and try to articulate why you're different or why your company exists as a result. And that's a pretty good foundation for building that foundational vision and alignment statement.
Love it, man. Love it. Okay, couple more. Let's see if we can get at least two more. So this one's coming from Michael. Michael, I'm going to throw this one out to Jared for you. So he says, let's say there really is no difference between your solution and the one that they're currently using. No real pain points, using some of your words. So what's wrong with negotiating on price to get the account?
I think in terms of the deal, there's nothing wrong with negotiating on price to get the deal. But you're going to have a problem, is that you're going to be continually undercut potentially by other market players in the space, and you're not going to have those customers for life. So one of the things that I said, at best they might not buy, but at worst they won't stay. I think that's where you're actually at. You haven't internalized those previous gateways or those previous prescriptions, and that person's actually much more likely to churn or to seek an alternative than otherwise would. So yeah, you might be able to negotiate on price and close a deal when there really isn't a difference between you and a competitor, but you're going to have a lot harder time making that person stay or see the really positive ROI that your solution could provide. So I wouldn't say it's the end of the world to do that, but you're not going to have those customers for life, which can create some customer success misalignment in your organization.
Got it. Yeah, I think there's sometimes you go with price and you end up, you may win it at first, but you almost lose in the long run. It's always a battle on kind of the value conversation.
And you're in a position of weakness, here. Actually.
Yeah, because you get to that place. Here's another question for you. So you talked about sharing content, really about highlighting your personal ability and your expertise. Had a question come in. You mentioned LinkedIn. People are always looking for ways to establish themselves as experts or thought leaders. Again, you mentioned a little bit about LinkedIn, but is there any other prescriptive elements you would give to kind of help people establish them being experts?
So one of the easiest ways, if you're having difficulty coming up with content on your own, let's say, writing something on a LinkedIn blog post, is to do some prospective interviews with either the top performers on your team or your management or your leadership or other people in your field or your space. So that's one of the easiest formats to go, okay, I want to bulk up my ability to seem trustworthy in this specific area. Seek out and find other people that are doing just that in that area and lead them through a Q&A session and ask them, hey, I want to write a post on this, and I'd love to ask you some questions and get your insights, and I'll attribute you and link back to your website. Do you mind if we have a 10, 15-minute conversation around this topic so I can write about it? And then you can publish that as an interview with this person for this reason. And you're going to learn something in the process. You're going to publish some content that's hopefully valuable to your prospects and your customers. But at the end of the day, you're getting some content out the door that doesn't involve you having to scratch at your head and figure out content and have writer's block for hours on end. In a 15-minute conversation, you can walk away with some really great content that you can utilize for a little bit of social selling and establishing yourself as a thought leader in your space.
I love it. Okay. Well, I think those are some fantastic ideas. So with that, Jared, really appreciate it. There's some other questions. Again, please continue the conversation. I know Jared's active on multiple social media platforms. Grab us both on LinkedIn. You'll offend us if you don't. And with that, let's get at it. Have a great afternoon.
Happy New Year, guys.